Okie doke. It's time for a writing revisit. Or rather, this isn't a strict writing revisit in the sense that all the other writing revisits on this channel have been my writing. This is something I found online a long while ago. I found this on some website at some point. Probably some Sonic the Hedgehog forum. It wasn't Bumble King, and I don't think it was Sonic Retro. There was some other one. It might have been Sonic Stadium. But it could have been on another website like FactPile or Comic Vine or something to that effect. But this is about Sonic the Hedgehog, and in specific, it's about Scourge the Hedgehog. Before we get into any of it, I just want to say for years, I mispronounced his name because I didn't know that Scourge was a word. I always called him Scourge. I don't know why. I have a serial habit of misspelling and mispronouncing things. But for some reason, I thought it was Scourge the Hedgehog, not Scourge the Hedgehog. Anyway, before we get into it, let me just lay down a baseline sediment for those of you who don't know who Scourge is. So in the original Archie Sonic continuity, way back in the day, when it first started, it was more of a joke series, and the writers kind of just used it to ape the kind of stories that would have been in the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, or the Saturday morning Sonic cartoon. One of the things they did was there was an alternate reality which had evil versions of all of the Sonic characters. Now in that original story, it was played completely for jokes. It was Sonic in a leather jacket, and his name was literally Evil Sonic. There wasn't a whole lot more to it. And Ken Penders wrote him to do some pretty gnarly shit. I won't get into it, but Evil Sonic basically tricks Bunny Rabbit into illicit relations with him by pretending to be Sonic, who was missing for some reason at the time. Plenty of people have covered this already. But basically, when Ian Flynn, who wrote the Archie Sonic comic from slightly before issue 175 until it was put into the grave, and he's currently writing the IDW Sonic comics, one of the first things that happened when he started writing Archie Sonic is that Evil Sonic tried to use the Master Emerald's power, presumably to go super, and so he turns green, and I think Knuckles like slashed him or someone clawed his chest, and that's why he has scars on his chest, and he started wearing red sunglasses for some reason, like he was Cyclops from the original X-Men films. Can't remember much of his deal. But basically, unlike Sonic, he abused his speed to basically defeat everyone in his reality and become king of Mobius, the planet Sonic and his friends live on. This particular panel is from an arc where Scourge and all of his lackeys basically tried to take over the mainline continuity of the Archie Sonic comics, and Sonic and him fought. There was even a Metal Scourge, and Sonic and Scourge had to fight Metal Sonic and Metal Scourge. It was a really good story arc, to be honest. And then you find out about how Scourge can go super and everything. Pretty much all the Hedgehog characters from both the games and the comics basically showed up and tried to fight against Scourge and prevent him from conquering Mobius. After that, he got locked up in prison, you know, the interdimensional space prison. That was probably a really lengthy explanation. The reason the whole Evil Sonic thing and the Evil Mobius dimension thing even existed in the first place was because it was a parody of an episode of the original series of Star Trek, except a lot worse because Ken Penders was writing it. And the guy for some reason thinks that he owns the rights to Evil Sonic now, even though Sonic is owned by Sega, and so even though he has the rights to his own characters now, it's still a blue hedgehog drawn in the same style as the Sonic. Anyway, we won't go into it. The prison arc that they put Scourge on right before the comic continuity collapsed was really good, and I really liked it. But I've always wondered, posthumously, how could you do Scourge within the context of the Sonic games? And someone wrote a really great explanation, and so I want to read that today. Alright, so I'm just going to read through this. Like I said, this wasn't my writing, this is someone else's. But I liked it so much, I kept it saved. I wish I had sourced it or archived it. Unfortunately, I don't think I did. The first line says, Scourge is Sonic from the bad future, question mark. So basically, before I get into it very much, it heavily involves the time travel mechanics of Sonic CD. Basically, it says, and this is a little bit too specific for me, but I'm just gonna go with it. Sonic CD caused a triple split in the Sonic timeline for the main continuity. The bad future, the normal future, and the good future. And it says something to the effect of, Silver comes from the normal future, and Scourge will come from the bad future. Let me keep reading. Okay, so in the comics, the evil version of Dr. Eggman is called Dr. Kintobor. We're just gonna wash over all the naming horseshit that involves Dr. Robotnik and how he was originally Kintobor. But basically, Kintobor is just Robotnik spelled backwards. And in the comics, after Ian Flynn started writing, Dr. Kintobor is the evil Eggman. Basically, the anti-Eggman is probably a better name for it. But basically, the idea is that in Stardust Speedway, in Sonic CD, obviously you race against Metal Sonic. So in the normal future, and presumably in the good future, although if I remember correctly, this document doesn't really talk too much about the good future, Sonic wins that race with Metal Sonic. And it says here in the normal timeline, at least for this guy's idea, the normal timeline, Sonic barely wins, like he narrowly wins that race. Whereas in the bad future, Sonic loses the race and Eggman wins basically, due to some small thing like, you know, Sonic sprained his ankle or something. And basically what happens is that Sonic CD is all about how Eggman's plan of taking over the future basically leads to widespread environmental destruction and pollution. So here, in this guy's idea, Eggman becomes Kintobor because he wins and he sees what happens when he wins. And basically he sees the repercussions of his activities. And the environment is destroyed and flooded with toxins, so he starts working to right those wrongs. But Sonic, obviously he has to turn green at some point, right? So in this bad future, since everything is so polluted, Sonic basically becomes recolored green because of the prevalence of toxins in the environment. Which to me is a really cool way of reproducing the same effect that Ian Flynn brought into the mix with Evil Sonic turning green because of trying to use the Master Emerald. And it ties into the basic theme of Sonic, at least in those old games, which was saving the environment, saving the ecosystem. And basically, I haven't read all the way through this yet, but if I'm remembering it right, basically the reason Sonic turns evil is because losing that race, basically, he refuses to give up, and he keeps fighting against Eggman. But obviously, once Eggman becomes Kintobor, he's basically a good guy at that point because he's trying to right the wrongs that he himself caused to come into reality. But Sonic loses sight of that and basically starts fighting against Kintobor and basically becomes the bad guy as Scourge because he's not so much worried about the environmental effects anymore. He just wants to believe that he should have won against Eggman, and he's now misguided as a result. Let me keep reading. Okay, so my idea differs a little bit from what's actually here. I thought that this stated that the reason he became green was because of the toxins in the environment, but apparently no, he just seeks out the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emerald, and that leads to him turning green, I assume, just like he did in the comics. Oh right, it goes into the other character. I don't remember the exact reason that Amy went nuts in the original anti-verse for the Archie Sonic comics, but she turned into what's known as Rosie the Rascal, which I believe was the original concept name for Amy Rose. And that was an excellent master stroke on the part of Ian Flynn. Well, basically you can attain the same end here, and it's written here, basically because Little Planet gets destroyed by Eggman as a result of Sonic's failure, Amy's family gets killed. That's what's written here. I think it's just enough to have it that Amy basically loved the Little Planet for some reason and gets unreasonably upset when Sonic fails to protect it, and that's the reason why she's like so super obsessive with Scourge. Okay, slight detour here. In the comics, there were multiple Metal Sonics, and one of the ones that was good turned into a character known as Shard right before the Archie Sonic continuity bit the bullet. Basically this version of Eggman basically rebuilds Metal Sonic, the one that defeated Scourge, as Shard. And here's some dope-ass art of Shard versus Metal Sonic from just before the reboot / cancellation. I like what this does to Scourge's motivations too, because it's pretty much the case that Scourge is bitter that Sonic has it better than he does. So it's like he's like bitter towards himself. But basically in this iteration, he's bitter because the normal future Sonic got lucky, at least as far as Scourge is concerned. And so he doesn't like the fact that things are going so well for the present day normal timeline Sonic. And that's why they fight. Oh, he's bitter because he did not have to, quote, endure the heartache he has. I like it. I didn't write it, but if you're out there somewhere, guy or girl, I really like this. Basically, this says that it's never made explicitly clear whether Scourge is from the good future or the bad future, which allows him to be persuaded by normal timeline Sonic that it's always possible that he could end up being the good future. I really like that. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I'm a fan of Scourge the Hedgehog. I really like this. Maybe it's just because I really like the green design, but Ian Flynn did a hell of a job flipping the evil Sonic character into Scourge. And that idea that I just read, I think really does a serviceable job of making it so that you could include him in other continuities outside of the Archie Sonic continuity. Because it was a little bit lazy. Correction, it was a lot of bit lazy to just rip off Star Trek as hard as they did in the original Archie Sonic comics.
Spock! Get these men off me! Spock! You traitorous pig! I'll hang you up by your Vulcan ears. I'll have you all executed!
I think not. Your authority on this ship is extremely limited, Captain. The four of you will remain here in the brig and in custody until I discover how to return you to wherever it is you belong.
But Scourge is different from characters like Knuckles or Shadow or Silver or Jet or Metal Sonic. He's a different kind of rival. Without sounding too pretentious, kind of a more introspective kind of conflict. Sonic has to look deep within himself whenever he's fighting Scourge because he basically is fighting himself. And I think Ian Flynn understood that when he was writing this character. I just wanted to bring up that revised storyline that I found online. If you were the person that came up with that, feel free to comment and just let it be known. Like I said, I think this might have been on Sonic Stadium. And if someone can find the post with this, again, link it in the comments. Scourge is different from many of the Sonic rivals. As you can see by this panel that I saved, he's basically Joker to Sonic's Batman.
All it takes is one bad day. That's how far the world is from where I am. Just one bad day.
Now, there are other green hedgehog characters in the Sonic macrocosm. The most obvious one is Ashura the Hedgehog, which was originally a glitch character in one of the various classic Sonic games. It's basically a glitch of Sonic's sprite. It turns green with blue shoes and like black markings on the forehead. I believe Ian Flynn said at one point that Ashura, the sprite, not this fan art, inspired the black crown that Scourge wears for a time. I personally feel like there's probably a way to have both Ashura and Scourge coexist. If you remember in one of my other writing revisited videos, I had written an arc that included Ashura in the Archie Sonic continuity. There's also Manic the Hedgehog, which is Sonic's brother in Sonic Underground.
I hate him! I hate him! Hate him! Hate!
Manic is Sonic's green brother from the Sonic Underground cartoon. Obviously this is fan art because I do not want to include that abhorrent design from the original cartoon in this video. But he's a drummer. I don't know much about him otherwise. I mean, he looks cool. I like his hair. All the frayed quills and whatnot. Basically the entire point of that was basically just to say there's a lot of green hedgehogs related to Sonic in all of Sonic media. So I think it would have been worthwhile to pursue something that brings Scourge back. I don't know anything about the IDW comic continuity, but this shows there's at least a way that you could introduce him again and not rely on the evil Mobius alternate reality that was in Archie Sonic. But I also know that I have a unpopular opinion when it comes to Scourge because I feel like most people hate him. I think the tides are turning. I think people hate the shitty friends significantly less than they did when I was growing up. But I think Scourge is one of those characters that people just don't really like that much. Sally Acorn's getting a little bit of a resurgence from what I understand, but Scourge, not so much. I just like the idea that you can use plot elements from Sonic CD to come up with a newfound rebooted story that introduces Scourge. I also just like his name, Scourge. Just sounds cool, you know? So, hats off to you, Ian Flynn. I'm so glad you redesigned this character because he existed in an era that I was not young for. But when I was young, Ian Flynn redid his character in a way that I really appreciate. Anyway, that's all for today. Let me know what you guys think of Scourge the Hedgehog. I know this isn't a Godzilla video, but let me know in the comments section what your thoughts are on Scourge the Hedgehog. Leave a like if you enjoyed, if you're from the good timeline or the neutral timeline. Obviously, if you're from the bad timeline, you probably don't have the technological access needed in order to watch this video. But anyway, that's all for today, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.